All right. Well, we thank you for joining us. I'm excited to have Tracy Gray here today, and we're going to talk about, to me, what's the number one most important topic in the racial justice movement, and that's funding Black entrepreneurs. We've heard a lot about after, the George Floyd murder. We've heard a lot of, how do we help the Black community? And I'm of the belief that the way you do that is through wealth creation. And we all know that entrepreneurship and building Black businesses is the path to wealth creation in our communities. But the problem is there's a lack of funding. And Tracy, I know you know this. I know this. You're just knocking on doors, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of people who are writing checks. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get more access to people like you who are actually doing the work of funding the next great Black company. So with that, I'm going to jump into questions. I just want to know a little bit about your background and how you got into raising a fund.
Yeah. Well, I started my professional career on the space shuttle program. I was an engineer on the space shuttle program. So I always say when people try to make funding Black people difficult, I always say it's not rocket science, because I was one. So we know it's not that difficult to do. It's not perplexing. And I was in technology, and I love technology. And because I love new things, I get bored pretty easily. But throughout my life in technology, I've always been the only, and then either the only woman or the only Black person. And when I got into venture capital by accident, I did a little stopover in the music industry, and one of the people I worked for became a venture capitalist, and here in Los Angeles. And I was like, what are you doing? I had never heard of it. This was in the 1999. And I had never heard of venture capital. And I don't know how well, now it's not surprising, but, I was in tech, but just didn't know about venture capital. I didn't know if there was not a lot happening in Los Angeles. And then I was outside those networks, those insular networks of pretty much white men who knew what that was. And I was like, what are you doing? I don't understand. These don't seem like companies, they seem like products. And I was just criticizing his investments without having the knowledge or the lingo. And then he said, well, why don't you come in and be our analyst and stop criticizing us from afar? And I was like, oh, okay. I like new things. So I went in there and I loved it. I loved working with new companies, figuring out their strategy, looking at their finance, all the things we do as venture capitalists and private equity. But what I didn't love is I was the only, yet again, I was the only woman investment professional. There was one Black guy who was one of the partners, but all the women were the girls who were the office administrators, and the office manager and my assistant. And and they wanted me to raise another fund with them, their third fund, because I had access to economic development money and politicians through my ex-husband. And I was like, no, I'm not going to once again bring public dollars to private side that are not, there's no equality there. I don't want my tax dollars to keep funding the same old white guys and the young white guys. So I was like, I'm going to start my own fund, which no one can do as an analyst, right? I'm going to start my own fund. But I didn't know that. And I'm glad I didn't know that, because not knowing, I didn't stop me. But what did stop me for a while was, as a lot of women, especially Black women, we think we have to get we have to be validated by all these external things and get credibility. So I had to understand, I really wanted to know the nexus of private capital and economic development. That's what I wanted to do, and how entrepreneurship can help communities. But I didn't know anything about economic development, so I felt like I had to go to an economic development nonprofit. Not a nonprofit gal. That was frustrating. They were doing great work. They still are, but not my jam. And then I thought, I need to have an MBA. So not only one MBA, I had to get two from two top 10 schools. It was a joint program. So I got my MBA, came out and was ready to launch my fund. And then we got our anchor, and it was going to be what everybody's doing now, straight up investing in early stage tech of women and people of color. This is in 2008 and people would ask me, are there women and people of color in tech? And I was like, do you not see me? I'm a woman, I'm Black, and I'm an engineer. I think I am a woman, a person of color in tech. And they literally didn't think we existed at that point. And, but I did get an anchor investor. And then a month later, the world fell apart. And it was our last great recession. But I always wanted to come back. And my goal was to do another fund. And when I worked for the mayor of Los Angeles, and when I came out through my work there, working with manufacturing and exporting, I saw this new blue ocean way to invest. I like to do things differently. And I wanted to create this firm because our firm, we invest in manufacturing to increase the export capacity of companies. And this is companies that export are more successful, they're more resilient, they create jobs faster. And when you couple them with manufacturing, the wages are much higher. The wages are about $94,000 a year on average, and more likely to have health care. So not only are they good jobs, they're the jobs of the future, they're clean jobs, and then it helps build wealth, which is our ultimate goal, is to build wealth for women and people of color.
So what can you talk about the size of the fund you're trying to raise, and then how will you measure success?
Well, we're raising $100 million and we're an early growth firm, so we're later than early stage startups, but we will do a handful of startups because there's some that should be exporting immediately. But and $100 million, I really wanted a strategy that $100 million was like the low end what you should raise, right? Because a lot of times the powers that be try to get people of color, especially women, to raise less. You see a lot of these 10 million, 20 million, $30 million funds, but there hasn't been a woman, I don't think there's been a woman, definitely not a Black woman, who's raised over $100 million for their first fund. And I want to do that. We need to break that. And our strategy actually could support 200 million. I have some banks saying, why don't you raise more? And I'm like, well, first you guys tell me to raise less, and now you want, what do you want from me? Just give me some money and let me invest, So the strategy supports $100 million, but it's also a philosophical thing I want to take care of, and like that mindset to get us over that $100 million barrier that people think exists. So then what was your question after that?
How do you measure success?
Oh, for me, I measure success if this fund isn't the only one anymore that's doing this, right? When we don't have to I'm not thinking of success for our particular fund. Yes, I want to make a lot of money and be successful, but the reason I do this is because I want to change a system. And so to change a system, there's got to be a bunch of funds like ours. We don't have to have this question of how do we get more capital to Black people and people of color and women. Like when we're done with that conversation, then that's how I measure success. Now, of course, I have metrics for our fund, but that's just because people want me to report, But I'm really trying to see this greater, I'm all about systems change because I'm an engineer and we work in systems, right? And if one part of a system doesn't work, you can't just keep going on your own and thinking the whole thing is going to work. It's not gonna. You have to get the whole system. So you have to look at everything holistically. And that's what I'm trying to do with my work at the micro level and the macro level. So success for me is beyond what we're doing. It's beyond me.
So let's talk about the system. Because, I am never one to talk about barriers, but, I'm not blindfolded either. Right. So let's just speak truth to power right now. Less than 1% of total venture funding in 2020, which was a record-breaking year in venture, less than 1% went to Black founders. So number one, why would anybody want to be a Black founder? But then number two, more importantly, Silicon Valley prides itself in being so disruptive and so innovative and making a better world, but yet they have a problem with diversity and inclusion in itself. So what do you think what's going on, Tracy?
Well, I mean, first of all, let's add Black women, who are the most educated segment in the population. We are, I think it's 0.006% of venture capital, like literally a rounding error. Yet all the research shows diversity brings higher returns. So what's going on is they don't care. I mean, they don't care. They created the system, and I don't like they and us and that kind of thing, but this, in this point, it's they. This system was created by white men. It's working really, really well for them. There is zero incentive for them to change. 98.7% of all asset managers around the world are white men. And they're making money hand over foot. So I don't even talk about, I talk about diversity and equity. I don't use the word inclusion because I don't want to be included in their spaces. That's not my goal. My goal is we are creating spaces for us and for all. And they need to come over to our table. I don't have any desire to be at their table, and I know that I'm going to look at things differently. And so I think, our whole culture right now is, fear, afraid of the other, afraid of what you don't know, and lack of interest. And I just think there's a lack of interest and there's laziness. It's so much easier to look to the left and see Joe Blow, white guy, to invest in than go out where we are and find our companies to invest in. So, I come down to laziness. They don't care. There's no incentive.
So are there any VCs you want to highlight who are either, who do care, or that you just in particular want to work with?
Well, I have my cohort and colleagues of women of color who I love. So Gayla Janino Burns at Walkstar, Carmen Palafax at 2045 Ventures, Norme Cadena at Supply Change, and then Yasmin Robinson, who started VC Include, was a platform to support brown and Black and women and impact investors. I work with them already, but we're all raising funds, right? And so we want to be able to co-invest together. So there's, not that I don't want to work with white guys. But I've done that my whole life, right? I want some diversity in my own world. So these women are, and they're all doing funds and strategies that are out there. Really, they're different. Carmen at 2045 is looking at immigrants and the power of immigrants. And Norme, she's an MIT grad. She's looking at the supply chain. What needs to be fixed within the supply chain through investment, and people of color are there. We're looking at manufacturing and exports and creating the clean quality jobs of the future for brown and Black people and women. And Bahia is looking at the whole system to support us all, right? To make sure the capital does come to us. So lots of women. Taj Eldridge, who is the senior director for investments at the LA Clean Tech Incubator. He looks at things differently. He's really focusing on brown and Black people in green economy, but he's starting a fund with Bahia. So there's so many of us out there. I'm leaving out a whole list of people, but I really want to be able to co-invest with these women of color who are looking at different things. And I'm on the investment committee for an advisor for Fearless Fund. So I get to see an area mainly around consumer products and CPG that I don't know well, but I'm learning with them, but also bringing them into look at the tech sector to expand what we as women of color, especially Black women, are actually able to invest in. So
that's great. So I really like the idea of creating our own ecosystem, right? And that's really what you're talking about when you're talking about, I'm not interested in going to someone else's table. We're interested in not only having our own table, but them coming to our table. So with that, I just want to give you the opportunity to leave the audience with really, your vision for, you keep mentioning, change in a better world. So what would your vision work like? Tracy's super successful, launches a fund, launches a series of one. What will be your, hallmark, the stamp on your great work?
Well, I firmly believe, and the UN has said this, that the path to changing the world is through women, right? And women in technology, in manufacturing, which is the foundation of our economy, more women getting in, especially women of color, we have to grow our wealth. And so when I leave this earth, I want us not to, like I said, I don't want women to think, oh, I'm just going to give money away, or, I'm going to invest where my husband tells me to invest, or my advisor. But women feel powerful through their wallets, not empowering, which I thought, but have power. Like the word power for women is icky. Like we think power means you're taking advantage of someone, but that's not what it means. It means agency and us being able to control our destiny and being able to help with the destiny of other women and girls. And growing women's wealth is how we do that. Women, especially women of the majority of people, women around the world are women of color, right? And the majority of people around the world are women, 51%. So why are we not growing our wealth? Because when we have wealth, we invest in companies, we give to charities that match our values more than we do now. And then we will give to politicians that pass policies. So when you invest in women, that's when you get this holistic, and I'm like hugging the world type thing, and that's when I leave this earth, I want people to say, Tracy, shut up. We don't need to talk about this anymore. We got it. We don't need you on some platform. So that's my wish.
Oh, well, that was great and very powerful. You all heard it from Tracy Gray. Support her. We're going to have links to get to her if you're interested in joining her and creating the ecosystem or funding her projects. And we just want you to look forward to our next series. We talked about funding this time. We're going to continue our State of Black Tech. Thank you.
Thank you.